answering your tough financial questions for the past 26 years. It's Allworth's Money Matters with co-hosts Scott Hanson and Pat McClain. Would you like an opinion on a financial matter you're dealing with? Whether it's about retirement, investments, taxes, or 401ks, Scott Hanson and Pat McClain would like to help you by answering your call. To join Allworth's Money Matters, call now at 833-99-WORTH. That's 833-99-WORTH.
Welcome to Allworth's Money Matters. I'm Scott Hanson.
I'm Pat McClain.
Glad you are with us as we talk about financial matters. Both myself and my co-host here, we're both financial advisors, primarily helping people transition from the workplace to retirement. But it's actually helping them get ready for the point when their work becomes an option and not an obligation. And then for those that want to transition to retirement, we help them do that. And this program is designed to help you take your calls, answer your questions, and talk about things going on in the financial world so you make wise choices.
And it's if you're within a few years of retirement, and we don't really need to talk about what's going on in the world, but there was a recent study that came out from Ken Dykewalt and Bob Morrison, who had
AgeWave,
which is a firm that we're very familiar with. It helps us kind of understand the demographics of the average retiree and what they're thinking of. But I'm probably the same age as a lot of average retirees or soon-to-be retirees. Although
you're a little young for to be
57?
retired. Of course you're young for retirement.
I hope that the retirement thing doesn't happen to me for a long time. But who knows, right? Who knows? Some people look forward to retirement, others don't. I'm in the latter. So 68 million Americans are changing their retirement plans just based on the current environment. 10% will retire earlier, 29% will retire later, and 61% of people that were in the consideration phase of this said that they don't believe that it has had an impact on them so far.
I tell you, it is such a strange, and by the way, if you'd like to be part of the program, I'd love to take your call. 833-99-WORTH is the number to join the program, 833-99-WORTH. If one were to look at the financial markets, the broad indexes as a whole, particularly the major indexes.
Yeah, the S&P 500.
NASDAQ, Dow. You would think nothing's wrong.
Yes, you would think that.
NASDAQ hitting new high territories, the S&P bumping up against it, the Dow bumping up against it. And then you look at like Lord & Taylor, which is the oldest, almost 200-year-old company, department store. Of course, department stores were on death doors before this, but files bankruptcy. You get company after company filing bankruptcy.
Well, not only those companies filing bankruptcies, those that are actually shrinking their footprint.
Correct. Oh, yeah.
I mean, that is every bit as important as the companies that are filing bankruptcy are those that are shrinking their footprints. And some of them, there's always a story behind them, we're just cutting our less profitable stores. Well, maybe.
If they're still profitable, you're not going to be cutting them.
You're not cutting them, right? You're not cutting them.
Yeah, but it's the markets. I mean, it's really bizarre how things keep bidding up. I mean, day after day, I wake up and I'm like, I wonder what the futures markets are, and kind of scratch my head.
Yes, which is, once again, if you're a longtime listener to this show, this program, you will know that we are not a big advocate of market timing because over short periods of time, if I didn't give you the indices and tell you what they're doing, but I just gave you the raw numbers about how corporate America is doing.
The GDP.
The
declining in profits.
The unemployment numbers. The increasing deficit. The increasing debt.
I think the part of this, Pat, is that, one of two things, or maybe both. Investors are either very far-looking today. It's like, we know this pandemic is not going to last forever. We know that it'll pass one way or the other, whether we have a vaccine or it's eventually going to burn out or whatnot. It won't last forever. Things are going to continue on. So either investors have that belief, or it's kind of like, where else do you put your money? A bit of fear of missing out on some stocks clearly right now in some asset classes. There's obviously that. There's a bit of a momentum rally right now.
I believe there is.
So the question is, how much is this kind of hot money has been pushed in the market, and how much is this long-term investors saying, I'm not going to worry about short-term market movements?
Or just plain lack of alternatives. The reality is savings rates for the average American are
through the roof.
All-time highs. All-time highs. And
Well, look, of course, when you're told to stay home, I tried getting a dinner reservation for several days out this morning as I'm driving in from
on a patio.
Yes, of course.
In the
yes.
county that Scott and I live, you are allowed to restaurants are allowed to open, but you can only dine outside
But they didn't have anything open for at least a week out.
because
Well, they're only about half capacity or a third capacity.
that's right. So savings rates is
So I
that
can't- so
is that driving?
If I'm not going out to dinner and spending money on it's a lot cheaper to cook at home, right?
Yeah.
So you end up, that's the average American, just saving more today.
Yeah.
It's strange times.
There's no question. Hey, we're gonna
And then
take,
if-
what's that?
Let's take calls.
Let's take calls.
We have all
and when
kinds of
we
good stuff to talk about.
and when we get back after some calls, at least in this show, I want to talk without a political agenda. I want to talk about Biden's tax proposals versus Trump's tax proposals. Are you okay?
You said without a political, that is a political agenda, is it not?
No, it's just fact. I'm not going to wait. I guess I would weigh in my opinion. All right, if you think it's a bad idea, we won't. We should talk.
No. Of course, we'll talk about it. I
We'll
think
talk
it is
a little
important
bit about it. We'll talk about it a little bit.
It's funny. I had we're gonna go to the calls in just a moment. I had lunch with my son the other day outside on the patio. I took him to lunch.
And your son is...
He's 22, recent college. He graduated from Boston College. He had a degree with Backroads. He had a job lined up with a company called Backroads. He had a job offer. They do active travel. He was so excited to be helping people ride their bike and all those sort of things around the globe. That's what his hope was to do. Do that for 3 or 4 years and then go to grad school. That was his plan. And of course, he had his job. No one's doing global travel right now.
Yes.
So, and the company shrunk so much. It's like, hey, all those job offers we put for 2020, they rescinded them all, I believe, because they're just trying to get their existing employees to work. So he's been home, but we went out to lunch, and he's 22, recent graduate. You can imagine where he lies politically, right?
He's fairly liberal.
But we're at, and I probably a little more in the middle on a lot of different things, but he just brings up these and I think he just tries to tick me off.
He brings up super liberal.
I said, can we not talk about politics just for lunch? And he says, well, there's a lot going on in the world. I said, I understand, but can we just set the politics aside and just talk
Your
about life?
son's messing with you.
Totally. I don't think he can help it. He wasn't planning on being home living in the
No.
parents' basement at age 22, right?
We're in California. No one has a basement.
Okay, I don't have a basement. That's,
Okay. No one has a basement. It's not the Midwest.
you're right. Nobody does it. I did live in
shouldn't
a
say
house for a couple
nobody.
years growing up that we had a basement.
Did you?
Yeah, it was dusty. All right. Anyway, let's take some calls. 833-99-WORTH is our number. We're in Colorado talking with David. David, you're with Allworth's Money Matters.
Good morning, guys. Thanks for taking my call.
Yeah, glad you're joining us, David.
So the question that I have is I'm hopefully going to be retiring here soon, and I have
When you say soon, is that
multiple-
like in a couple weeks, in a couple years?
probably I'd like to retire within 5 years
Okay.
if I could. I have retirement accounts in a 401k, Roth, and IRA accounts, and I'm wondering I'm 50. I'll be 54 this year. I'm looking to figure out find out what the pros and cons are of taking distributions from my 401k, or should I take them from my Roth, or should I take them from my IRA? Not really sure what
Great
what
questions.
I should do.
And
for that planning.
you know, one thing I got to commend you for, your retirement's about 5 years out. This is really kind of well, you always need to be planning for retirement, but within about 5 years, this is the time to really get your ducks in a row and say, all right, what's life going to look like 5 years from now? What should I focus on? How much should I be saving? Where should I be saving those dollars? Should I be doing it on a pre-tax or an after-tax basis? What do I do about my mortgage? Are we going to be in the same house at retirement? or their kids were still finishing, helping them get launched, all those sort of things, and getting a plan in place. This is like probably the most important time, those 5 years prior, because we've been doing this long enough. I mean, we have a firm, we help people do this, and we'll have people come in years in advance, and we'll help them get ready for retirement. They go to retire, they're in great shape. I've had probably the worst case situation I remember is a guy had a retirement offer from his employer that he took. He had 60 days to make some decisions on his pension. He came in to see us on day 59. Like, there's not much we can do to help him prepare for retirement. Right? So with this, I think.
What are the account balances? First of all, maybe the question is an overall financial planning. Do you own a home?
Yes. So financially, I'm set. I have quite a bit in all of my retirement accounts. We max out our savings in our Roths and our 401ks. So I'm just trying to figure out where I should be looking to potentially move money. Should I start doing in my 401k the Roth option as opposed to doing the pre-tax dollars? I mean, we probably have a couple million in those accounts.
And your house is paid for, I assume.
No, probably within the next 5 years.
Okay.
Probably by the time we retire, the house will be paid.
Perfect.
And what's the annual income, family annual income ballpark?
Over 100.
Because the way and the thing that's going to drive these decisions is not the investment options in these vehicles, because they're all the same, right? We can have roughly the same investments in a 401k as an IRA as a Roth. What will drive this is the taxation of the withdrawals. And so what we got to do is try to figure out what we're projecting, essentially David's retirement starting 5 years from now, and then for the next 30 years thereafter. And the challenge, of course, the longer we go out, I mean, tax law is based upon, Congress writes the tax law.
It could change. Well, actually, before we took your call, I mentioned that we are going to talk about the changes in tax law
being proposed
if Joe Biden becomes president.
Yeah. So in a perfect world, we've got great diversification in our tax strategy, just like we would have great diversification in our investments. Right?
Okay.
Because we don't really know. I mean, right now, we know that Roth IRAs, they've got a lot of great things going from them. They're tax-free income at retirement. There's no required minimum distributions. There's no taxation on them upon our death unless they exceed the estate tax limits. So it's a fantastic savings vehicle. But we don't know if in the future someone says, hey, there's going to be an excise tax on distributions above a certain amount, or there was already someone had a provision about speeding up distributions, having required minimum distributions for account balances over like 50,000 or 100,000. So that could actually trigger in. And then in your 401k, of course, that's all 401k and your IRA, it's all taxable. So at age 72, we have required minimum distributions, and could those things be changed? Further, our tax rates are progressive. So some income's not taxed at all, some's taxed at 10%, some's taxed at 12%, then we go to 22%, then we go all the way up to 36 and some change.
So the question we need to ask now is I think the question you're asking, should you be making contributions into your Roth 401k versus your after-tax 401k? Was that one of the questions?
Yes.
What percentage of your retirement savings is either outside of you said roughly $2 million. Of that, how much is outside of a 401k or traditional IRA?
Such as in a Roth or a brokerage account outside of
or a rental property, something that's not
probably a few $100,000.
Okay, so let's say it's 300,000 few, and it's 2 million,
right.
So 15%.
And will you stay in Colorado when you retire?
Yes.
And how much? And so you need to look at your tax table. You're giving us kind of broad numbers. So you said a little bit.
I would still. You know what? My gut tells me, if I were in your shoes, I would do a Roth 401k contribution.
So would I.
because you're still
Right, so-
you're kind of about in the middle as far as the taxation goes. And if you just look out far enough, if you've already got a lot of money saved, just assume it's going to continue to grow, right? And then I start thinking about what your taxation is going to be in retirement. And even if you were a 3 or 4% withdrawal, add Social Security,
You're going to be in the same or higher.
Yeah.
And the idea of putting more money in the Roth is allows you more choices in the distribution phase. So let's say that in your retirement and you're saying, okay, I need $100,000 to live. You might take 20% out of your Roth in order to keep the dollars coming out of your 401k at a lower marginal rate.
Okay. So
Right.
basically try to limit the amount that I take out of the 401k for those distributions
No.
as long as possible.
No,
So-
not at all.
not at all. Not at all. Not at all.
You want to maximize the lower tax brackets on the distributions. But 5 years out, who knows?
So what we do know is that you should put together a diversified tax strategy, much like you put together a diversified portfolio. And right now, based upon the dollars you have saved and who you are, it appears to me that you are underutilizing the Roth IRA or after-tax dollars outside of your 401k or IRA, which you may pay a little bit higher marginal tax rate on those dollars going in today, but it's going to give you significant benefits in 5 years from now when the distributions take place.
Okay. So question. So I max my Roth IRA currently.
Yes.
So if I go back and change my 401k to a Roth IRA, or Roth 401k, will that affect my ability to put money into that Roth IRA I already have?
Not
Not
at
at
all.
all.
Not even a little.
Not at all. Okay.
It won't change
I will do
anything.
that.
It's just allowing you. Now, if you're making $190,000 a year, maybe.
Even at that, given if you didn't have much saved, let's cut the number in half, right? If you had that half the money, I'd say continue doing the pre-tax. But you got quite a bit in your 401k, and you're 54 years old. So we start thinking I'm concerned this between you and your spouse. You start projecting out what it's going to be at age 60, considering even 5 years from now, 59, the contributions going in, the growth on it.
Yeah.
And then now we're retired,
And it's $3-4 million.
and you're going to be still having some growth because you're going to at 59 years old retiring, you're going to want your overall principal to keep growing to keep pace with inflation. So suddenly your pre-tax retirement account, then we start worrying about when you're 60s, like, what are we going to do when you hit age 72 and you have a required minimum distribution? What's that going to do for the taxes?
You could find yourself in a higher tax bracket in retirement than you ever did working. So
Yeah,
that's why you're going to
that's
make
right.
the contributions to the Roth.
That's exactly what I would do.
401k.
No question.
All
You've
right.
done a great job saving.
Oh,
You're
my
on the right
gosh, you're
track.
great. You're great. You are the millionaire
Great,
next
guys.
door.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
He's the millionaire next door.
Thanks very much.
Yeah. Now my next door neighbor is a deadbeat.
It's hard to tell. There's lots
Oh,
of neighborhoods
are you
that are
kidding
filled
me?
with big hat, no cattle.
Oh my gosh.
Lots of neighborhoods.
My neighborhood particularly.
Big hat, no cattle.
No, it's funny. My neighborhood, it's either they either have a huge mortgage or no mortgage. It's like there's not much in between.
No.
I was talking to the guy a guy who works at Mercedes dealership, and I said, who is the typical buyer for Mercedes? He says, well, it's all over the map. He says it's either someone comes and pays cash or they do everything possible in order to stretch to get a lease on a new Mercedes.
Oh my.
He says people that have no business. He says we have a lot of people buying these cars have no business driving these cars financially. It makes no sense whatsoever.
But
They look good.
and he says, but they said they wanted one, and my job is to
their
get them
job
into
is
one.
to sell Mercedes. I mean,
Yeah.
don't blame them for that. All right, let's continue on with calls here at Allworth Financial. To join us, 833-99-WORTH. We're talking with Linda. Hi, Linda. You're with Allworth's Money Matters.
Hi, how are you today?
We're wonderful.
Thanks for taking my call. I was listening to the previous caller in a similar situation on the questions that I have today. The biggest issue that I have is I'm coming from a female point of view, and my husband and I are both in the same industry. We both own our own businesses.
Wow. You compete
Do
with
you
one
compete?
another?
Yeah. Do you compete with each other?
We say, well, I put it this way: we complement each other in the same community, but when he's not listening, I do compete.
So you are what we call in our industry a frenemy. Your friends
Yeah.
someday and your enemies
Well, in
the
this
other.
case, they actually do sleep together. As he talked about
Okay.
Right,
in bed with the
right.
competition. You literally.
Yeah.
And I always win.
Okay. Okay. Well, okay. I'm sure he's not listening to this show.
Okay.
What can we do for you?
So I'm actually also a little bit older than him. I'm 63, and he's been doing what he's been doing for a long time, and I was fairly new. It was really more of a financial transaction for me to purchase my business, and I'm ready to sell my business because I am starting to be concerned with all of our financial eggs being in one basket.
Okay.
So the question is yes, I've made a
By
big
the way, if
investment.
you sell it to your competitor, your husband, it's not going to help you with that problem. But
No, and that can't happen. So based on the requirement of the purchase. So 6 years ago. So the question is, and financially, similar to the, my husband thinks cash is king. And so he's purchased a lot of his business and still has notes on it, and I just get wigged out by that. But then he shows me the financial. It's like investing your money to get a return on your investment.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a pretty stable industry. So I just go, okay, I see what it's bringing in, but it's also over the past 2 or 3 years, including me owning my business, has put us in that upper tax bracket, and you just pay a lot of taxes.
do you contribute to a 401k, solo K type plan?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. I'm also, yes, we both have a 401k that we maxed out. And I'm doing makeup because of and now he can too. I'm 63, he's 57.
Do you have employees?
Linda, do you have employees?
Yes, both
Okay.
of us do.
Got it.
Okay.
Yeah, between the two of us, we have like 30 employees.
Okay.
We have a couple of small annuities. We do have stuff outside. We have a couple of funds accounts. We have cash and savings and bank. He has quite a bit of cash capital in his business and waiting for the next move or buying another business. So he's been very successful at that. I'm just tired of that merry-go-round for me personally.
Okay.
So once again, taking, selling the business, I like to pay things off, and then I'll ask a question about my home. Take it all and just pay the capital gains.
Yeah. How long have you been married?
Almost 20 years. Second marriage for both of us.
Okay.
We've accumulated our wealth in the past.
Got it.
20
Got it,
And
got
so
it.
you want to sell your business and retire, sounds like, or do something different.
Something different.
Your husband wants to keep doubling down.
And he wants to use
Yeah.
leverage in his business, and you don't.
Yes.
And are there personal guarantees on the notes that he has? I would imagine there are.
Some not. He's pretty good at what he does. So the industry is actually able to leverage itself. So
Yeah,
that's
cash
new.
flow pays the notes, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
And so, the banks will take that, and then some people do a carry. So
Uh-huh.
a lot of times there's no cash out on his
So
end.
how much do you owe on your home?
So that's a good question. So the question is, the house is worth $700,000. We owe $250,000, but
Okay.
we did a major remodel, and there's cash tied to a CD to that remodel for 2%.
Okay.
But it's cash set aside in a CD, and I
Okay.
have a fixed rate. I have
Yeah.
a fixed rate on mine, and I used to do.
Well,
loans with
so the answer to that question is you lent the money to the bank and then they lent it back to you. and charge
Yeah.
you 2% for the pleasure of doing
what's
that.
What's the underlying? What's driving you to call today? What's like?
Yeah,
where's the pain point?
So the pain, I want out.
Okay,
I
so
want out of my business.
so
And how do we do that?
you actually don't have a financial question. You have a relationship question. That's what you have. Because
Well,
truly, so I could sit down in a room with you and actually say, okay, you should sell your business because it's going to reduce the risk this way and this way. But then he's going to go buy another business and leverage it up, and you're in exactly the same place you were before the meeting.
But this,
yeah, but my name's not on the door.
But your name's on the door financially.
Yeah, I know. And you're right. And this is a good question for people that listen to you, that this is really how the difference between
totally.
men and women.
So you know what? So Linda, we're
About-
going to put you on hold and carry you through the break, which we typically don't do. But there's so often couples come to this stage and not in agreement. So
You're doing a workshop for financial planning for couples coming up in the next
this
week or
week.
two.
Yeah.
Is it this week?
Yeah, it is this week. You can learn more in our. We got to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Can't get enough of Allworth's Money Matters? Visit allworthfinancial.com/radio to listen to the Money Matters podcast.
Welcome back to Allworth's Money Matters. Scott Hansen here with you.
Pat McClain.
And we asked Linda to hold on through the break, and Linda's at retirement age. Her and her husband they've kind of at a point where they've got maybe different objectives. Linda, they both have a business in the same industry. Separate businesses. Linda would like to sell hers and transition away, and it sounds like her husband wants to double down. He sounds like he's been buying some other little businesses and self-financing them. And so, Linda, you're still with us?
I am.
Okay. So
this is interesting, but not completely unusual. What we're seeing here is there's a divergence between the two of you on risk and lifestyle.
So let's pretend you had a transaction closed today, Linda.
Okay.
And next week you're no longer working. What's the next couple years look like for you?
Like, what do? You get up? Do you go to the grocery store and shop for 7 hours? You go play tennis? What's your life? Do you travel?
What are you hoping to do?
What's it look like?
So that's a good question, because I asked myself that the other day, and it's just like I don't really have an answer because I've been so busy doing what I've done, and I also had another career on top of that. So I was really working double duty for about 8 years, and I'm just burned out. And so to ask myself that, I'd probably travel amidst, other than what's going on right now.
Yeah.
That would be, he set aside in our little planner about $20,000 a year for traveling. And I said, wow. And he says, well, I know how my wife likes to travel. So, I would travel. I'd take some cooking classes, but
would he?
Right. I'm at that. I'm sorry?
Would he travel with you if he was working?
Yes, he could do that.
Okay.
And because the one thing about the COVID, it's working remotely is much more acceptable now, and even with client interactions, as you know, obviously, because you've been doing probably Zoom or one of those like that yourself for the last few months.
Yeah, there's nothing like doing a meeting with a nice dress shirt on and a pair of soccer shorts.
So oftentimes we're both practicing financial advisors. That's how we started in the business 30 years ago, and oftentimes couples will come, and we're not pitching ourselves. I'm just talking about the process of meeting with an advisor. Oftentimes couples will come in with just like this. They'll have different visions of their future, and some say like, "I'm ready to retire now," and the other one thinks, it would not, like myself personally, I'm 54 and I financially prepared for retirement, but I hope never to retire. I don't think it would be good for me in lots of ways.
Well, we're both in the industries that really is, we've been asked, why would you even sell? It's one of those similar to yours. It will continue to pay out until it absorbs itself, if not repaid.
So what if you sold your business and you guys had some meeting of the mind of how much risk his business might put on the family finances? Because that's what your concern would be like. Look, I suddenly sell my business. We've got our finances shored up. What happens if, we saw COVID-19 come from nowhere, right? And we saw the havoc it certainly leveled on some businesses, right? And I think if anything, it's just a good reminder that no business is immune, even the ones you think that nothing ever could happen to it. Who knows, right? So I think your concern would be, what happens if my husband's business pursuits, something goes south there and it damages our finances and your retirement?
Right.
So, but I think you can structure things in such a way and have some agreement to say, like, these are the core things we're going to focus on as a couple to make sure our finances are secure. You go you sell your business and retire. Obviously, he's not going to have 24/7 to go goof off with you, but
he loves to work. He's so good at what he does. And I'm really proud of him for that. It's just.
And what would he be like? So let me ask you this. Let's say that you really worked on him and convinced him to sell his business, and now he's retired. Is that the guy you want to spend your time with?
Yeah, I'd watch him play tennis.
Yes.
No, what I'm saying is, would he be happy in playing tennis all day long?
He's an awesome guy, so he would be happy he even goes shopping with me. So he's just,
wow.
He's one of those kind of guys who's really.
I hope my
really
wife's not
good guy.
listening.
No kidding.
Yeah.
So
He even does laundry.
well, I did laundry this morning.
He does laundry.
I folded my wife's clothes. And my daughter, who's living with me, came in and said, "You do a terrible job folding clothes." And then she folded everything I folded for my wife.
Perfect.
And I'm thinking, I'm going to get credit. I'm going to get
stuff
partial.
around the house I do poorly. That way,
I'm going to get partial credit for this.
Yeah.
So your situation. So here's what I look at. You're trying to. You want a lifestyle change and you want to lower your risk. My fear would be is that he might increase the risk. You pay off the mortgage. He feels a little bit comfortable. By the way, you mentioned that money in the bank and you borrow money at 2% more. You should just pay that off. That's just silly. That's silly because you don't have access to the money anyway. So it's not like having any. It's the bank lent you money and they borrowed money from you and then lent it back to you at a higher rate. So that's just silly. You want to pay that off.
And that decision was made in a moment of time when we were doing a major remodel.
Okay.
Understand.
It's irrelevant what brought you to this point. This is where you are.
So with as long as you can actually set up a formula in terms of to mitigate how many companies he buys as a debt service as a percentage of revenue or net income, and you can live within those parameters, I'd be comfortable with that, which means, look, you can continue to buy these companies, but your debt service can't ever
no personal guarantees.
No personal, or it can't be any more than 25% of revenues, which is exactly, by the way large institutions lend to business, which is they have debt service covenants on them.
And then further, maybe it makes sense for him to figure out how to restructure his day so he has more free time. I mean, I'll be very transparent here. So in the year 2000, 20 years ago, a long time ago, but both Pat and myself went to a specific coaching program out of Chicago, which was largely built upon really identifying what value you bring to the organization. And figuring out how to really delegate well and how to have time off because we were both working too much.
It was interfering with my marriage significantly. I had young children and I was working 60 plus hours a week. And my wife said, "I'm not living like this." So I wanted to continue to grow the business, as did Scott. So we had to figure out a way to approach our roles in the organization differently.
And we got to the point where we would have call them free days off where you're not working at all because you've got good people behind you who can handle the day to day. And so part of it, like I said, I don't want to retire. And part of it's because I've been able to find kind of a rhythm along the journey such that I'm not working 60 hours a week in and week out, and I could take a vacation and leave the laptop behind. and so it's a bit of a mind shift thing. So, and there's no reason he couldn't get there if that's. I mean, you guys need to find this is a marriage thing as much as a. But if I were in your situation, I would start with visiting a good financial advisor and sit down and have a meeting with the advisor and talk through these things, because they could be kind of a middleman and mediator on this,
Right.
and help you come up with some solutions.
But,
That'd be the starting point.
but we do have this is a shameless plug, Linda. Thank you for listening.
And I appreciate the call, Linda. It sounds like these are good problems to have, by the way.
Shameless plug, Wednesday the 12th and Thursday the 13th.
This Thursday, 4 p.m. Pacific time.
On Wednesday.
Yep. 5 p.m. Pacific time on Thursday.
And it's a workshop you're doing.
It's a live webinar, retirement planning for couples.
And you put this together.
That's correct. I spent quite a bit of time with my team. It wasn't just me by any means.
Yeah.
And I actually don't know how to put a PowerPoint or that sort of thing. I can't do that part, but I could, as far as the flow of it. And we deal quite a bit. We're going to look at a particular couple. We got some videos and stuff. So it's not going to be 30 minutes of PowerPoint presentation. I promise you that. But it deals with a lot of these sort of issues at retirement. And because most of us go into retirement, or at least we're planning for retirement. We're getting there. Like Linda, she's 63, retirement age. What's this future look like now? Oftentimes, husbands and wife don't have the same exact vision of their near-term future or their long-term. And then even when we get into retirement, sometimes things happen, change our retirement. We're dealing with an aging parent or whatnot. So there's lots of things. So that's a workshop this Wednesday and Thursday. Go to allworthfinancial.com.
And especially if your husband's not like Linda, who apparently
Linda's husband, you mean?
Linda's husband, she said he goes shopping with her, does the laundry, makes a good living.
What?
When shopping, that's a gene. I'll go to Costco with my wife.
Costco. All right, let's continue with calls. 833-99-WORTH is our number. 833-99-WORTH. We're talking with Jeff. Jeff, you're with Allworth's Money Matters.
Good morning, guys.
Hi, Jeff.
I have a question regarding Social Security. And Pat, you mentioned on 2 weeks back on the show something about a Social Security funding crisis.
Yes.
And that it might cause them to make changes in the rules or in the laws around Social Security.
That's correct.
I'm rather curious about that because I'm one of those people who is trying to make it to 70 before I start drawing my own Social Security, and I'm wondering if I should hold on or if I just better take what I could get.
How old are you?
I'll be 69 in October.
Okay. And what is your approximate income without Social Security? How much is that a year?
Without Social Security, it's about right around $50,000 a year.
Okay.
And I do have what they call a Social Security widower's benefit because my wife passed quite a few years ago.
Okay. Well, that changes.
It's a no-brainer.
That changes.
Wait till 70.
Wait till 70. That changes. Because then you're going to go on your own.
You should for sure wait for 70.
Yeah, you want to wait.
Okay, so you don't think anything's going to change?
Here's the current structure. So Social Security, they got all kinds of gimmicky accounting. There's the trust fund, which is now empty, and so it's close to being empty, right?
Close.
So there's no more surplus going in there. We're starting to eat into the surplus right now, draining it down, which is scheduled to run dry sometime around 2030 to 2033, depending on which study you look at.
Yeah, and
so
some of the estimates have actually moved them up to, I think I quoted one that said 2028. But there's
in the next 10 years. And if we get to the point where we are suddenly there's no surplus left in there and it's in the red, there's an automatic cut across the board. The way it's currently structured, there'll be a cut, and I think it's 22% across the board. Now, we're not clairvoyant, so we don't know what the future brings or what's going to happen. But if we were facing this today, it would be our belief that Congress would do something to step in to make sure that the 95% of retirees continue to receive their Social Security, or even 80%, the vast majority, their full benefit, particularly those that are somewhat poor in retirement. And there's a lot of very poor retirees that rely. Matter of fact, the majority of Social Security recipients, Social Security makes up the majority of their income. Right? So there's not that many people that can afford to live without Social Security. So I can't imagine elected officials are going to stand by and say, I'm going to go ahead and watch a 22% reduction on these retirees that desperately need this monthly check.
And giving the same amount to Warren Buffett, who doesn't need it at all.
Or Bill Gates,
who doesn't need it at all.
So it would be it's our contention, our belief that if we were facing this today, and frankly, if I were an elected official facing this today and having to deal with this, what would probably happen is there would be some sort of reduction on those who, quote unquote, could afford a reduction and not on others.
Which would be a means testing, right? And so they already do a form of means testing by the taxation of Social Security, because Social Security becomes taxable to certain people at over income levels for a couple, 50% of the benefit over incomes of $32,000 and $44,000, 85% gets taxed. That's a means test, right? That is a means test. And by the way, it's not indexed for inflation, which is interesting. So how much is your benefit and the widow's benefit a month now?
It's gross. I'm not sure. Net, I get about 1,600.
Yeah, definitely.
And, okay, you
100%.
Yeah, you want to stay on that. And how much would your benefit be at age 70 from your Social Security when you file against it?
Well, if the yearly thing form that you get from Social Security is right, it's about 3,600.
Yeah, I'd stay on it.
I'd wait another year.
I'd wait.
Question.
I'd wait.
Yeah.
And $50,000. My guess is the first line they draw in the sand will be at $100,000
or higher.
Or higher.
Yeah. So appreciate the call, Jeff. And Jeff, if you called and said my income's, I have a pension of $120,000 and $1 million in my 401k, we'd say take the. I mean, with your widow's pension, we'd probably crunch the numbers and figure out when that break-even point was. But if you didn't have the widow's benefit, it's like take it now. And we don't know what's going to happen in the future. But any sort of government taxation benefits, you got to realize that there could be changes in the future.
The rule of thumb is if you don't need the income to live on, then take it in Social Security. If you need the income to live on, then defer it.
Wait. In other words, if that income is going to make a difference in your lifestyle, defer as long as possible. So anyway, appreciate the call. 833-99-WORTH. We'll get you on with Allworth's Money Matters. We're talking with John. John, you're with Allworth's Money Matters.
Hi, Pat. Hi, Scott.
Hi, John.
Hey, I recently got laid off after
Sorry.
38 years with the company.
How old are you?
And so now I'm 61.
When were you hoping to retire? How much longer were you planning on working there?
Next year at 62.
Okay.
So I was hoping to hit 40 years with the company and retire next year, but that's okay. So I'm about a year and a half early on my plan. So I have a pension that now that I've laid off from the company, I can start taking a pension that's been sitting there from the company. The pension actually is with the PBGC, the government.
Oh, they went through a bankruptcy at some point in time.
They did 2 years ago.
Okay.
So my only option is an annuity. There's no lump sum available.
Okay,
that's right.
So there's three options I'm trying to decide between. Do I just take the single annuity, which is no survivor to my wife, and that's $21.50 a month, or do I take the dual, which is 100% to my wife, that would be getting with me alive, and that's $19.25. So I give up about $225 a month.
Okay.
Or they have something called a pop-up. So if my wife happens to die first, well, if my wife doesn't die, she gets $1,900 just like we would be getting.
Yep. And then
But if she happens to die first, then it pops back up to the 2150.
That's
for
right.
me.
Okay.
Is there another option where maybe a joint and 50%?
There is.
Okay. So here's what the problem is in this conversation, John. Every one of those numbers you shared with us is the same, right?
Based upon a normal life expectancy.
Based upon a normal life expectancy, right? So it doesn't matter to them which one you choose. So in order to give you
Because once there's thousands of retirees, some are going to die earlier, some are going to die later.
So if you could tell me the exact date you and your wife were going to die, I could give you the right number. I could tell you which one to take. So since that's highly unlikely that you could do that, what we want to take into account is your health, your wife's health, your wife's pre-existing conditions, your pre-existing conditions, longevity in the family,
and the income needs,
and lifestyle considerations. Right? Are you active, inactive? You know, what we're trying to do is get some probability in there as to date of death, and then what the income needs are, right?
So we're both healthy.
Okay.
She does have some pre-existing conditions, just higher blood pressure.
Okay. And what other assets is the home paid for?
Yeah, so the house is paid for, the cars are paid off, we don't have any debt.
And how much money do you have outside of these PBGC pensions? How much money do you have in IRAs, 401ks, brokerage accounts, savings, like the whole thing? If you were going to put it in a suitcase, how much money would there be in the suitcase?
Figure $2.5 million.
Okay, you take the pop-up.
Or I don't think you should take a joint and 100%.
Why not? They've got normal life expectancies. It's not going to matter one way or the other.
You got a point.
It's not going to. He's got $2.5 million.
So the number's the number.
The number's the number. So just assume they have a normal life expectancy. Either take the 100% joint or survivor or the pop-up and not worry about it. And you both are eligible for Social Security?
My point would be to counter Pat here, because we won't know the answer until you're both dead, right? That's the bottom line. All right? Then we know what the right choice was. But to counter your point, one could argue that because they're not going to really, this isn't going to be a huge requirement for maintaining their lifestyle, number one. Number two, if he predeceases, the overall family income needs are going to be reduced because he's no longer there to consume parts of his pension.
Okay.
So I would argue for a joint and 50%.
Well, and to counter that, I would say it doesn't really matter. So the reason I would ask for the pop-up provision is it gives us the full amount of insurance that we actually need.
And then you could tell your wife, honey, your pension's going to be exactly the same if I die.
We're talking about a difference of $3,000 a year on a guy that actually has a net worth. In addition to this, Social Security in a house that's paid for, as a percentage, it's 0.00.
Yeah.
So I could go both ways. Yeah. This is the most palatable to me.
Pat sold me. I'm just thinking. I'm in your shoes, John. Right? I'm in your shoes. It's like. That difference in a couple $100 a month is not going to make any impact on your retirement living.
That's right.
Because of your savings, your income. I assume you're both qualified for Social Security. So but at least this way, it's like something happens to you. You can look your wife straight in the eye and say, "Hey, honey, something happens. I die early. That pension is going to continue on 100%. You don't have to worry about anything."
So the question,
because Social Security would be impacted. What you pass away. There will be a reduction there.
There will be a reduction there.
Right.
So the things that if you were sitting in an office with one of the advisors, they would make sure that your portfolio is well balanced and that it's tax efficient for the dollars outside of the 401k. They'd put together a distribution plan or a Roth conversion plan prior to age 72 in order to bleed some of those dollars off at a lower marginal rate. They would ask about your health insurance, your Medicare, your estate planning, and long-term care insurance. So if I was to circle John and his wife, who went through a retirement plan prior to than they expected, you guys are fine, most likely fine financially. You just need to clean up the edges and make sure it's all in place. And you have to actually start thinking about Roth conversions, especially before you start taking Social Security.
Yep.
Especially before you start taking Social Security prior to age 72.
When you said earlier, Pat, as a rule of thumb, if you don't need it, wait. But that's you've got to balance in. Do we do some Roth conversions? And if so, it might make sense to defer the Social Security.
Yeah, but you've got a year. He's 61.
Yep.
So you've got some time. So you've got a little window here, a year and a half that you can actually play with for tax planning. But you want to make sure all those rest of the things in your financial life are taken care of. So.
Yeah.
Appreciate the call. You're doing great.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it didn't make it quite to what your goal was.
You did fine.
But it sounds like you survived a company bankruptcy.
Yeah,
that
you did fine.
You know what I find interesting, Pat? Someone joked with me the other day. They said, "There's Pat, Scott. You guys only have 12 questions on the show. You have 12 questions, and maybe that's somewhat accurate. But there's every situation still unique. The nuances between, and I just even thinking of a couple of the callers during this program with John, and what we might recommend for his pension would be different for somebody else with different assets and whatnot. And even just starting off in the program, we had David, who we told him, even though his income was relatively high, told him to use a Roth 401k, which oftentimes with someone of that income, we would say use a pre-tax 401k. Every situation is
advice is nuanced.
And that's why, I really think there's tremendous value in good financial planning.
Finding a good financial advisor. So, hey, Scott, before we go, we had promised that we were going to get to the changes in the tax plan. Unfortunately, we are running out of time, so we're going to put this on our podcast, the changes that Biden is proposing if Joe Biden, if he becomes elected president versus what Donald Trump, our president, wants to do. So we're going to put it on a podcast that you can go to and listen to on our podcast. Little 10-minute summary of the proposed changes. And again, a reminder for our workshop, Financial Planning for Couples, which comes up Wednesday the 12th at 4 o'clock Pacific time and Thursday the 13th at 5 Pacific time. And you can find that. You can register. Scott's going to do it himself. You can register at allworthfinancial.com.
That's right. And by the way, Pat, to get the podcast, you can get it at our website at allworthfinancial.com. Or if you're already a subscriber and it drops into your feed automatically.
And if you're listening on podcast, if you'd be so kind as to rate us and maybe share it with a friend.
Give us a review.
Oh, yeah, it's a review, not a rating. A review.
Anyway, it's always been, we so much appreciate our listeners because we would not exist without you all. So thank you. Enjoy your rest of your day and then the rest of your week. We'll see you next week. This has been Allworth's Money Matters. Well, welcome to Allworth's special podcast on taxes. I guess that's what we want to call it.
Yeah.
Scott Hansen here with Pat McClain.
And you may have heard us mention this in our radio show and the podcast that we ran out of time, so we were going to do an addendum, an additional part of the podcast. And we're just going to kind of go over a little bit of the changes that Joe Biden has said that he is going to actually put into place and compare and contrast that to Donald Trump.
Of course, it's still at a time in the election, and we're trying to take a middle road on the political aspects here. But it is time in the election cycle where they are trying to appeal to some of the fringes because the base is going to. There's certain people are going to vote for Biden regardless. So he's trying to go out and strum up a little further, go for a little farther left to grab those people. And we're not trying to make any.
Yeah. So, and the reality is that either the federal government is either going to have to slow spending or increase taxes, or a combination of the two. But the current path
is unsustainable.
It's not sustainable.
It's unbelievable how much for 2020.
Yeah. And quite frankly, if I was a politician, I might be, inclined to spend it. I don't know if I would be so inclined to indiscriminately spend as they are. But so the present law is a 21% corporate tax. Joe Biden and company would like a 28% corporate tax. This is on the business. That's the big highlight in this. There is some affecting REIT dividends and a little bit
on the business stuff.
On the business, but
most people looks like, what's this mean to me personally?
Yeah.
Most people.
And then the other business thing is a a tax increase on employee wages over $400,000, which is by and large a relatively small portion of the population that they have wage income of over $400,000.
Oh, here's what this does. So it's 6.2% both for the employer and the employee. So it's 12.4% plus Medicare. There's the Medicare tax on it. So that you're paying 15.3% in addition to income taxes.
But it's got to a cap of Social Security. I think the cap's like $150.
No, because there's the Obama Medicare surcharge on it.
Understand, but it's not the full 6.2. So you can't just add the numbers together because there's different caps through the system. There was absolutely a tax increase, but what's the maximum they withhold Social Security tax on today?
Oh, correct. It's $135,000 or
something like that. Yeah.
And so right now, what according to Biden, after 135, there's nothing. But when you hit 400,000, things above that, Social Security taxes kick back in again.
That's what it looks like. That's what it's going to be flushed out. I assure you. I doubt it's going to look just like that. But
this
that's
is what he's
it's
proposing. That's what you were talking about.
Yeah, I understand.
I'm confused with your.
I don't believe that there's going to be a window if Joe Biden is elected president, that they're going to have a window where there's no Social Security tax between 150.
I thought we were discussing what his tax proposal was. It's his tax proposal.
Okay, you're right. Not what I think it's going to be.
This is his tax proposal.
Okay,
that's what we're talking about.
Okay.
His proposal.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry,
thank you. Okay,
I don't think it's probably not going to. I can't actually imagine them taxing wages like that, because think about this. You're already and they want he's proposing that the maximum individual income tax rate goes back up to 39.6%
from 37. Yep.
And no preferential capital gain tax rate on income of $1 million or more. So let's assume you're a California business person, started a business, right?
Yep.
Maybe maybe your income has been almost nothing. You're at this. Finally, someone's buying your business and paying you $10 million for your business.
Yes. All of a sudden,
you got 39.6% to the feds. If you're living in the state of California, you have 13.3. Of course, there was someone who's talking about bringing that up to 16.9. Plus, you have there's the Obamacare tax on it. So you're well north of 50%. And so now you're the same business owner and say, well, instead of selling this, it's profitable now. I'm going to start taking a higher income.
Which you're going to be taxed on that.
39.6% plus state of California, or whatever state you reside in. So now we're over 50%. You add in this self-employment tax?
Yes.
Now we're literally almost 70%.
Okay.
That's
been proposed. The proposal.
That's been proposed. And these people, I hate to say it, tend to employ people.
Yes, that's the proposal. So those are the big changes. The other big change is
the estate tax.
Is the estate tax, but this applies to such a small percentage of the population. Right now, the exemption amount you can give as a gift or a death is $11,580,000, and that's through 2025. It's supposed to revert back to $5 million in 2026, indexed for inflation. So it's going to be someone over $5 million. The Biden proposal is to bring the whole exemption amount back to $3.5 million. And
this is, by the way,
this affects the next one affects
everybody.
Everybody.
And I would not be surprised if we saw this coming at some point in time.
We talked about this on our radio show a couple
weeks ago.
It's the
elimination of the step-up basis on inherited assets. So right now, if I bought a stock for $10, I hold it my life, it's worth $100, I die with it. I die and I leave it to my spouse even. The cost basis, which was $10, gets stepped up to the current market value. So essentially that $90 of gain that I would have had and typically would have to be taxed on is forgiven. And the argument behind the step-up basis is because a lot of that's inflation, and otherwise we're taxing an asset twice.
But you could index an asset to inflation as well.
Of course. So if I were a betting man, actually, I would say you'll start seeing the elimination of that on estates over some dollar amount.
I would expect that. We talked about it on the radio show before I read the proposal for Biden's, why it's actually even allowed. So this is what it is. This is what it is. So it will be good or be bad. It is what it is. So let's appreciate you listening to the special podcast edition.
I would anticipate tax rates regardless. The next decade, expect higher taxes, but it may not be an income tax. It could be a value-added tax.
It could be a wealth tax. It could be any kind of tax.
A number of things.
Expect a change.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for listening.
This program has been brought to you by Allworth Financial, a registered investment advisory firm. Any ideas presented during this program are not intended to provide specific financial advice. You should consult your own financial advisor, tax consultant, or estate planning attorney to conduct your own due diligence.